Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, everyone. We are just about to start today's 2025 AI and Education Community of Interest event, co-sponsored by the World Bank, the AI Observatory of the EdTech Hub, and a whole set of other partners, supported by the UK FCDO, former Commonwealth and Development Office, and a whole set of other groups as well. As people trickle into the room, we'll wait just a few minutes, maybe about 30 seconds. Please do feel free to take advantage of the chat at many of these other events that have been sponsored by these groups over the past years. We've often had a very vibrant conversation in the chat as well. And with that said, I'd like to officially start. So my name is Mike Turcano. I'll be helping to coordinate what I hope will be a fascinating conversation today, part of a continuing series of conversations as part of what we're calling the 2025 Global AI and Education Community of Interest. We typically have a few hundred people from around the world who are active in exploring new uses of artificial intelligence in education, and people who are making, for better or for worse, decisions about such uses. And today we are going to focus on AI-generated content and what that means. Content may mean different things to different people, and we may be talking about different forms of AI as well. This conversation is sponsored by the World Bank, the AI Observatory of the EdTech Hub, in partnership with the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, and a whole set of other organizations around the world. That said, I'd like to turn it over to the executive director, the head of the EdTech Hub, Verna Lalbahari. Verna, could you please say a quick few notes of welcome? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Regardless of what time of day it is, where you are, I want to extend a very warm welcome to each and every one of you who have set time aside to join us today. Thank you for being here. As Mike said, I'm Verna Lalbahari. I'm the executive director for the EdTech Hub, and I'm delighted to welcome you to, I believe this is our third session of our AI and Education Community of Interest series. And like Mike said, we're very pleased to bring the series to the world as co-hosts with our partners at the World Bank, and of course, with the important support from our funders at UK International Development and the FCDO. Last year, with funding from the FCDO, the EdTech Hub launched our AI Observatory and Action Lab with a very clear and simple message: to ensure that AI contributes to solving the global learning crisis rather than widening the learning divide. So I'm very excited for our conversation today, as AI-generated content in education represents what I think of as one of the most game-changing opportunities in our field, especially for reaching the most marginalized by traditional education systems. Generative AI can help us create adaptive and interactive, localized learning content that speaks to students in their own languages and reflects their local cultural contexts, addressing critical gaps that have long excluded learners from meaningful educational opportunities. But we really need to go in with our eyes wide open. And our eyes wide open on the good, the bad, and the ugly, with a really good, clear understanding of the potential challenges and risks in order really to mitigate for them. So again, generative AI systems, as you know, carry some inherent biases that can perpetuate inequities if we're not careful. The content that reaches our learners really has to be appropriate and truly reflective of local education priorities and values. We all know that AI-generated fluff, or what I think of as low quality generic content, is everywhere online. We cannot allow this to infiltrate our education systems, or we risk losing the trust of our teachers, our learners, our parents, and communities. So before I move on, I want to digress for a second and share with you why this topic is especially meaningful for me. In my past life, I served as the EdTech director for the state of North Carolina, not a very big state, 1.5 million students, maybe 100,000 teachers, most probably gone up by now, 116 school districts. And I was in the hot seat where I needed to procure a open educational resource content, digital content that was rigorous, that was aligned to local standards, and of course that was relevant. And it was a heavy lift. It was a heavy lift because teachers in the state of North Carolina and teachers all over don't want an added layer on top of their already busy workloads. And so the standards alignment nature was really critical. And in full transparency, it was the component that was the hardest nut to crack because it's also the most labor intensive and expensive if you have humans doing it. We're in a very different ballgame right now, where we have the ability to curate rigorous, standards aligned content and make it available very seamlessly to educators across the world. And so the conversation today is really timely and important. And I'm super excited to bring together innovators who are pioneering thoughtful approaches to AI-generated educational content. So with that, I will turn things back over to Mike, who will moderate our conversation with Squirrel AI from China, Chimple from India, and organizations like UNESCO with Mark West that are fostering critical collaborations in the space. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. Back to you, Mike.
Thanks so much, Verna, and thank you for everyone who's joined us today. And for those of you I see from the chat, I see a number of familiar names and people from Brazil, from Rwanda, from Nigeria, from Italy, from India, from Ethiopia. A special welcome to members of and alumni from the World Bank EdTech Policy Academy. Representatives from ministries of education and ministries of IT around the world. It's great to see you all. Please do feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. My name is Mike Turcano, and I have a series of questions that I'd like to discuss with our speakers today, and you're welcome to pose questions in the chat as well. A lot of our focus today will be on learning lessons from across Asia, and especially two of the most vibrant laboratories for learning about the use of AI in education from China and India. I'd like to welcome Jolene Liang, who is the co-founder of Squirrel AI, which you're going to hear a lot about, one of the leading ed tech and AI and education companies in China. I'd like to we'll also have a conversation with Shrikant Talapady, who is from a company called an organization called Chimple in India that will, I think, be a nice contrast, see what's the same, what's different, what they're pursuing and what they're trying to do with learners in India and across the world. And then we'll have Mark West from UNESCO, who leads or co-leads Digital Gateways Initiative, thinking about maybe reimagining how we think about public support for digital learning content around the world and what role AI has to play with that. So first, I'd like to welcome Jolene. Jolene, if you could please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Squirrel and what you're doing in China.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone. Hi, I'm Jolene Liang from Squirrel AI Learning. I'm the co-founder of the company and also the CEO of Squirrel AI Learning North America. So we have been doing AI education for 11 years. So that's long before everyone knows what AI is in education. So our focus is to use AI adaptive plus modality of large adaptive model to provide personalized learning. So in China, we've got over 3,000 centers and we've served 43 million users already. So what we do is we have the self-study center, and in the centers, we have supervisors who will guide the students to use our Squirrel AI Learning tablet to do self-directed learning. The roles of teachers have been changed. They are not teaching in our self-study centers. They are doing data analyzing. They do psychological and emotional communication interaction with the students. So Squirrel AI Learning's system is ranked as the highest level, the level 5 autonomous driving, which is which means the student can learn from the system by themselves without the teacher's teaching. So that's a huge difference between the traditional teaching and the current AI-based virtual tutor teaching. So yeah, I will stop here and then talk about more later.
Great, thank you, Jolene. So already, I imagine some people are probably shaking their heads and thinking 3,000 learning centers across the country. That's it's quite a lot of scale. Scale, I know, is something that Chimple thinks about a lot as well. Shrikant, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Chimple and about how you're thinking about and using AI.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks for having me in this session. So I am Shrikant Thalapady, and I am the founder and CEO of Chimple. Now, Chimple is a nonprofit dedicated for literacy and numeracy, and it's based out of India. We have a gamified learning app through which children can self-learn reading, writing, and basic mathematics. Now, this is not only in English, but also in various Indian languages as well. In terms of scale, we have about 200,000 children using it all across India, and of course, a few in Africa as well, for example, in Mozambique and Sierra Leone. Now, we believe that learners should be able to learn in various contexts. So, it could be in school or at home. It could be online. It could be offline. It could be with the help of a teacher, with the help of a sibling, or self-directed on their own as well. So we have been working on the foundational literacy and numeracy problem for the past 10 years. We were one of the top 5 finalists in the Global Learning X Prize as well. Now, in terms of generative AI, there were a few challenges that we saw, which we will expand upon later, essentially to do with the hyper-personalization of content for children. It could be due to various languages, which is a huge challenge in India. It could be due to various communities in India. It could also be due to various classrooms in India. So how can we create personalized learning journeys for children with the help of a teacher? So that's the reason why we got into generative AI in the past year. And we are currently generating a lot of content which can be localized for a particular learning outcome and utilized by children in our app. So we can get into it much more in detail as we go through the session. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Shrikant. And already, so I so many notes of potential follow-up with you. And like with Julie, I mean, 200,000 learners, that's a lot. And thinking about this nexus of the student and the teacher and the technology and how these work together and how a teacher and technology supports students in self-directed learning and what that means at different ages for students as well. Lots to unpack there, but as we start to do that, I'd like to introduce Mark West. Mark West, known to, I think, many people here in the community, who helps lead digital learning efforts at UNESCO, and he's going to talk particularly today about some of the lessons and learnings and some of the thoughts and ideas and ambitions for something called the Digital Gateways Initiative that he is working on. UNESCO is working on in partnership with UNICEF and other groups around the world. Mark, welcome to the conversation today.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mike. Happy to be here. Nice to see a lot of familiar faces and some folks that I haven't met. Again, Mark West, I work at UNESCO. UNESCO is the lead UN organization for education, science, and culture. And I lead a team that works on the future of education. We function a bit like a think tank within the education sector of UNESCO, and we try to call attention to issues that we think our member states should be thinking about with regards to the future of education. Obviously, a lot of this has to do with the implications of new technologies, AI in particular. And then I am also leading an initiative with UNICEF, and we are working to help countries cooperate as they think about supporting education, public education in online and digital realms. And through this initiative called the Gateways to Public Digital Learning Initiative, we're trying to, again, help governments share information about how the right to education can be supported in online and digital spaces and how countries can improve public digital learning platforms to ensure that public education sort of crosses the digital line, and that there are places and platforms for public education in all countries. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks so much, Mark. So we do have we have a representative from a company, we have a representative from an NGO, and I would say a representative proxy for the public sector and governments here today. So I think we're going to have lots of interesting perspectives, probably agreement and maybe some disagreement as well. Feel free, everyone, to pose questions or make comments in the chat as we go forward. I'd like to go back, and one of the things we hope to get from Mark today, the Gateways Initiative that Mark helped leads, has recently sponsored a number of study tours around the world. They were in China not too long ago. They were in Indonesia. They were in Egypt as well, to learn some about perspectives of government leaders who are going and visiting, and what types of questionings they're asking other government leaders about the use of technology, as well as what they're asking themselves and the companies and NGOs with whom they work. Jolene, so you've been working, you said, for 12, 13 years with AI in education. And what is the AI you're working with? Is it generative? Is it the old-fashioned kind of thing, machine learning? How could you describe a little bit about if someone says, you know, AI, what is it to you? What does it mean in Squirrel? How do you use it? What would be your sort of response?
Well, a very quick answer is LAM, which is the Large Adaptive Model. So that's the name of our engine. So Large Adaptive Model is combined with adaptive learning with the multimodality of large model. It's not only large language model. So LLM is only less than 10% in our LAM. So in education, it's very important that we can collect and we can create the multimodality of the learning behavior, the data, and also the content. So it's not only LLM. And adaptive is very, very important in education as well, because it can help to provide personalized learning for each different students. So in our system, for example, we have 1 million students, which means we have over 1 million learning trajectory for the students. So none of the student learns the same way or learns the same content in our system. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Jolene. So it is a combination of this personalization and the use of what we now consider the large language models, which I don't know if they are, it's primarily to help with engagement, to help with that sense of personalization with the learner. How do those two, I would say the two types, I'm going to be crude, two general types of AI, how do you see the use of like language models? How are they relevant to, and how have things changed from what you've been doing over the, you know, the 9 years maybe before ChatGPT and these things exploded into our consciousness?
Exactly. So before LLM came to this whole world, we only had adaptive learning. We didn't have LLM before, right? It's like 3 or 4 years ago we started. So the difference is with adaptive learning, it's kind of a closed loop ecosystem in our system. But with large language models, it's open up. Of course, we can try to get information and data and resources from outside of our closed system. But it's also very crucial that when we get in those information, we need to evaluate. So that's why we had different agents to do evaluation to make sure the contents are very necessary. And of course, with AIGC, we can create more contents and more effectively and more efficiently. So if I put in a very general concept, it's kind of our closed ecosystem with the open source ecosystem combined together. The key differentiation and key, I would say, core advantages of our system is because we've already got over 20 billion learning behavior from our closed ecosystem, which means those outside open ecosystem doesn't have those learning behavior. But those learning behavior are very important to be taken into account based on our machine learning, deep learning, reinforcement learning to make sure that the LAM can recommend the most suitable, appropriate contents for the students. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jolene. Shrikant, how does Jolene, what she's describing, does that describe your approach at Chimple? How does it align with, or how is it in contrast to? And you know, are you using machine learning and language models? If so, how are you working with these things together, and how do you think about what's useful and what isn't?
Yeah, so Mike, I think that there's I would say few differences between what Jolene has mentioned and Chimple's approach to it. So a couple of things. Chimple is only focused on foundational literacy and numeracy, which means that we are, looking at children between the ages of maybe 5 to 8 or 10. So at this age, we are quite careful that AI generated content is not directly displayed or shown to the child. So we have a layer in which a teacher or a curriculum developer actually verifies the content before actually it is being shown or used by the child. Now, the other big difference is, we typically use AI primarily for generative purposes only. So we are not currently using AI for the adaptive learning or for the algorithmic sort of recommendation of the next lesson that Jolene has mentioned. But one key thing in Chimple's approach is that we want to involve every teacher across India in actually developing generative content and making it being used by their own children. And there are a few reasons why we do that. So essentially, we have a workbench through which any teacher can come in and then can say, hey, I want to teach addition today. Why don't you generate some games which can be played by my children either in the classroom or at home. And then the system, our generative AI workbench will actually create these games which can be edited by the teacher themselves and then released to the children. The reason why we involve the teacher is because the teacher knows their classroom and they are actually able to validate the content before it's actually shown to the child. Mike, you're on mute.
Yeah, indeed,
Yeah.
different approaches. Yeah, thank you. Struggling for, I had a bit of lag there in my connectivity. Apologies about that, everyone. So two different approaches, working with children and teachers in slightly different ways, and working with different, let's say, flavors of AI. We saw the question from Juan Baron in the chat, who's a colleague from the World Bank, asking about, we're not seeing impact from the use of LLMs yet in education. Is there? How does that impact differ from the use of more traditional uses of AI and machine learning and personalization? These are open questions for us, and I think for the community. And one of the things that we're hearing also is that it's maybe not either or. In some cases, we're also hearing of combinations of these approaches or certain approaches for certain reasons. As we see with Srikant, the use of generative tools obviously develop content as well. So I think these are things. Mark, how do you, listening to Jolene and Srikant, how does this, what grabs you, and how does it, you recently were at a big event in China, which is really one of the, I would say, the real cauldrons of innovation with AI in education. What resonates with you from what you've heard from Jolene and Srikant today? And I wonder if you could share a little bit about some of your larger perspectives about AI use in education, particularly from some of these recent study tours you've been on.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mike. I mean, maybe to share a few different perspectives. One is just the diversity of approaches that exist. That's been really surprising as we sort of go from country to country, what different things countries are doing, to maybe sort of contrast. In Indonesia, they have quite a vibrant tech sector, a lot of people online, a lot of, people spending enormous amount of times in front of screens on digital devices. There, the priority is exclusively to empower teachers and also to empower school leaders with some of the public digital learning applications that have been built. And the understanding is that while students are in school and in classes, they don't want them to be looking at screens. They want them to be looking at each other and to be interacting with a human teacher and to be gaining all those things beyond just academic curricular learning that happen in school, socialization, play, and particularly important for young children. So I just wanted to say that the approaches that countries are taking and what they're prioritizing really differ from place to place. We heard a lot of different words from some of the previous speakers, adaptive, personalized, and other things. Those are big words. I mean, what allows a system to personalize learning? What allows a system to, an autonomous system to personalize learning for an individual? That requires a lot of different assumptions. And we would encourage sort of transparency about what those assumptions are to direct personalized learning. But personalization, I think the most important type of personalization is that educational content is within a student's zone of proximal development. I mean, that it is at the right level is really crucial and important. And I'm very excited about some of the uses of systems and AI systems to ensure that the content in front of learners is at the right level for that that particular learner. And I think it's great to hear about some of these innovations and how that is happening. We have all experienced having content that it's too difficult, it's outside of our zone of proximal development, or it's sort of too easy and we don't feel like we're making progress. So I think that's one thing that I am very excited with. But I also wanted to just sort of finish these introductory thoughts with a note of caution, and that is that, you know, this is about AI generated content. And when AI generates content, we know that AI tends to sort of go right to the middle. It is, you know, it is right, bland, generic, average, anodyne. It goes by these sort of different labels, and often it is that. And, you know, how educative is that sort of content? Do we also want to see content that's more on the margins? I remember having teachers who had some really, you know, kind of personal touches to the educational content that they would use. Textbooks that were even, which are sort of bland to begin with, but were unusual. And so what sort of content, you know, if AI is generating the content, what will that content be? And I also wanted to say that those words, bland, generic, average, anodyne, these words are sometimes, you know, those don't seem sort of offensive, but what that down the middle often can mean is it can mean a sort of cultural hegemony. And UNESCO is a cultural organization, and observing that what is sort of in the center for some people it is not at the center of their sort of cultural understanding. So a lot of sort of sticky things with these, and to pay attention to those, you know, those words of personalization and adaptive. There's a lot of assumptions behind those sort of words and concepts. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Mark. And maybe we could unpack some of those assumptions. And it's great to see a number of questions in the chat. I'm also, if I may ask some of the colleagues from the EdTech Hub and the World Bank, if it'd be possible, please do continue, everyone, to introduce yourself and ask questions in the chat and using the Q&A function. But also, we could post some of the background links to Chimple, to the Gateways Initiative, and to Squirrel AI, and some of the things we're talking about in the chat. That would be great, just for ease, so people don't have to go to Google or to a chatbot itself to learn more. Shrikant, so in response to what Mark was saying, you know, are you talking about, are you going to the middle? How are you thinking about personalization? And what is the role of if you could unpack a little bit more about what the role of the teacher is in that interaction that the student has with the technology. We could, and then we'll hear from Jolene to see what might be different and what might be the same. And there are a couple specific questions for Jolene that have been posted in the chat as well. But over to you, Shrikant.
Yeah, Mike. And Mark, I think you hit the nail when you said, like, you know, generative AI content is just kind of bland and in the middle. It's great, but, you know, it's bland. So the way I like to look at it is, you know, I started in tech in the 90s, and the big word then was garbage in, garbage out, right? So now I think the thing that we should worry about with generative AI is context in, context out, right? So there is a particular type of content that's going in to train most of these LLMs, but the consumers of it are going to be, you know, everyone around the world. So for a child who's actually sitting in rural India, is that child getting enough of the local context from generative AI? And the answer is no, because the data has been trained on the content that's been generated by chats or by engineers, chats by you know, political consultants, or chats on the internet, but that doesn't really speak to the truth for that particular child. So when we look at hyper-personalization through generative AI, I look at it at a 5-level lens, right? So language, region, community, classroom, and child. So if you actually look at each of these in sort of a sort of narrowing down of the context, the first one is language. Right? There are wonderful LLMs and wonderful generative AI products out there, which are actually trained primarily on English and a few on other Western languages as well. But when you come to India, there are very few really good quality ones. So that becomes the challenge number one. The second is, when you narrow it down to a region. So a great example that I have is if you go to ChatGPT and if a teacher says, generate a lesson to me on addition and food, it's going to say, you have a pizza and I'm going to give you 3 pizzas, and how many pizzas are you going to get? But a child in India, especially rural India, has not heard of a pizza, and it just becomes completely foreign to that child. Then come the community itself. Can you generate something that's true to that community? And then comes the classroom, right? So a teacher, for example, teaches a lot of things in the classroom, and some of them stick. So for example, the teacher tells a story and then everyone in the class is interested. So now what would be really engaging to the child is actually if you generate content and exercises and quizzes very specific to that story that the teacher has told. But the teacher is really in no position technically to actually generate that content. And that's where Chimple hopes to come in and empower that educator and teacher to actually create content for all these contexts. Now, finally, the piece is the child itself, right? Every child has their own likes and dislikes. So maybe a child is really interested in space. So why not create content and generative AI exercises that actually are rocket themed, for example, and that would actually increase the engagement of the child. Now, of course, all of these are not solved problems, and these are, I think, going to be the challenges that we actually see in the next 5 to 10 years. But that's the way we at Chimple are looking at a personalization.
Thanks so much, Shrikant. Jolene, how are you thinking about, how are you looking? If you could describe a little bit more about the adaptive learning model that you use in Chimple, and describe a little bit more what it's actually like, that interaction of the child, the learner, with the technology and with the teacher or the supportive adult there. Could you describe a little bit more about what's happening in that environment?
Sure. We probably have, totally different platform and roles. And so in Squirrel AI, the teachers, as I mentioned, the teachers don't teach. But in the classroom or in after-school self-study centers, we still have supervisors. So what they do is they don't generate generative those contents. They don't teach. What they do is after the students' self-learning sessions, the teachers, the supervisors will look at the data analysis and report system to do the data analysis of a student's learning behavior, and then talk to the students and even need to talk to the parents. So all the teaching and learning process is within the tablet, within the Squirrel AI large adaptive model system. So the students learn by themselves from the system. But I also want to go back to what Mark mentioned earlier, that the assumptions, right? The personalizations is very, very important. The students cannot learn by themselves if the system is not strong enough. So the process in Squirrel AI is like the student need to be doing assessment first, which means the AI will diagnose the student's knowledge state from the past years of all the learning components, and then find out what the current level the student is at. If the student is really lack of some prerequisite learning components, then the LAM will recommend the students to learn. And the whole process will be learning, assessing, training, practice, and then learn again. So it's a full cycle in the system. That's really personalized because the AI will only capture that student's learning behavior, the data, speed, and eye gazing and everything. That's the multimodality. That's why we could provide personalized learning to different students. So the whole process I just mentioned are all done within the LAM system. So this whole process is just, self-directed learning by the students with the system. Then on the back of the system, we have the data analysis system. And also parallel, we have a parent guiding system. If the parents, they want to look at the progress of the students, any warning of the students, and any process, and then parents can log into the system and then to monitor their kids. But majority of the parents are pretty lazy, to be honest. So they have the login, but they don't look at it. But the data analyst, the supervisors, they have full responsibility to monitor the student, to guide the student. So, that's the personalization and adaptive learning in our system. And also the roles are different in our system compared to the other platform or system.
Thank you, Jolene. And where does the content come from in Squirrel? Is it taken from existing official Government of China learning materials? Are the students learning particular subjects when they go to Squirrel? Like, what is the typical subject, and where's that content come from?
Okay, so we cover from pre-K to G12, and we cover the subjects math, English, Chinese, physics, chemistry, biology. The contents, we design the contents. We didn't use AI to generate those contents. That's very, very important that we cannot just use AI to generate. So from 11 years ago, we had a content team in China, and they are from different province, different districts, and they are superior teachers. They have over 20 years teaching experiences. So that's our content developer team. And even until now, we still have those content developer team. So they follow the Common Core based in China, and also in US, we also follow the Common Core in US as well. Then we design the contents based on different structure of the learning components and the classes. So yeah, we designed. We have animation, games, teaching videos, and they are all very nano level in a very granular level of the learning components with a 3 minutes video about that length. Yeah.
Thank you, Jolene. And Shrikant, how does this, so you've mentioned that you had helped, you help teachers develop content, and you have content that's native to the Chimple platform, I believe. What is that content? What particular subjects are you geared towards, and what level of learners? You mentioned literacy and numeracy. What does that mean in the context of Chimple, and how do you source your content in addition to the content that you help teachers generate?
Yeah, Mike. We are, if you look at a schooling system, we are from the kindergarten all the way to maybe 3rd grade. So that's where we operate for the foundational literacy and numeracy space. We have content not only in English, but also in 3 to 4 different Indian languages. Soon we will be having it in Portuguese as well. Now, content is traditionally, we have been generating it based on the curriculum of India. So the NCERT curriculum, we also looked at, for example, the Common Core, and we kind of tailor our content to each of these curriculums. Now, what we have actually realized that this is a really tough task, because there are hundreds of different curriculum standards across the world, and of course, innumerable content pieces across the world that address each of these curriculums. So how can we, as an organization, create gamified content, which is the core of Chimple? So children come into the Chimple system, play games, and learn while they're playing games. So how can we develop games that address each and every one of these curriculums and different contents, right? So that's the reason why we are leveraging generative AI and teachers to actually generate the content themselves. So just as an example, a teacher who is in the the state of Karnataka, Bangalore, where I am from currently, can actually upload a textbook from the local curriculum and tell our workbench, generate gamified content for addition or subtraction, and then it will generate content which the teacher can then verify and then push to the children.
Thank you, Shrikant. That is, so again, a very, very different approach to generating content and accessing it, and especially when you have content across India with multiple, examining bodies and multiple curricula and multiple languages. Mark, I'm wondering, when you hear about this, how you think about, we have, looking at the names of people whom I recognize, we have at least 25 folks from ministries of education around the world with us today. How can people who help lead public education around the world, how should they be thinking about holistically, how should they be thinking about the use of these types of tools from companies, from NGOs, meshing with what they're offering as a national education system? How do these things fit together, and how don't they? And what are you seeing from your vantage point at UNESCO?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mike, and great to get these different perspectives, and great that there are people from ministries of education. We know that there are a lot of applications in some of these, that are personalized for individuals. We hear about, hyper personalization. That means sort of helping an individual gain skills. Ideally, those skills will give them competitive advantages in an open market. That makes a lot of sense if I'm the one who's paying for that education. But I think governments often take a different perspective. I mean, we can talk about personalization not just at the level of an individual, but at the level of a classroom. We can talk about personalization at the level of a school. We can talk about personalization at the level of a state or a province. And of course, we can talk about personalization at the level of a nation. And we have to remember that depending on where one is sitting, the purposes of education can look a little bit different. From a governmental perspective, we're often trying to create, more harmonious societies. UNESCO was founded to build peace through education and help to ensure justice through education. So learning to live together with others. There are reasons sometimes why people follow a similar learning journey so that they have a shared educational experience. And that is often what unites people in a country, is that they went through a similar sort of education system. And the kind of end game of everybody following a sort of unique learning journey, I'm not sure how you create those sort of, shared ideas, shared culture, and even shared truths can become problematic. So I think there's, we often default to personalization means personalization to the level of an individual, but I think there's a lot of innovation to happen for personalization at the level of schools, of classrooms, of states. And indeed, we have seen some of this. In China, they were talking about how their national digital learning system actually enables provinces and even municipalities a lot of power to alter that sort of system or tailor that system so it's appropriate for the students in a particular city or in a particular province. So I think there's a lot that's going on here. I also just wanted to sort of draw some analogies that I think can be helpful about this idea of what sort of constitutes personalization. We often think about, we all navigate using GP or maps, whether that be Google Maps or some other application. It tells you how to get from point A to point B. And the idea being, I'm here, I want to develop these kind of competencies, or I want to get, this set of sort of skills, and the system will tell me the most sort of efficient way to get there. There's a lot of assumptions about what is the most valuable and efficient way to get there. Again, to go back to the sort of map, I'm speaking to you from Paris. Google Maps will tell you how to walk from UNESCO headquarters to, a major site, to Notre Dame. But that may be a sort of efficient way to get there, depending if you're walking or taking a bike. The system's complex. You can enter different variables. But if I'm taking a tourist to get there, I'm going to make all sorts of different stops along the way because I want to see these other things. That I don't think there is such a thing as a sort of perfect learning journey. It's not to say we shouldn't sort of try, but those stops in the middle and which way we go, and I think human teachers are often very good at sort of finding that. Maybe they can be drawing on AI for sort of ideas in different directions, possible routes, but to say that a system will always know the best route is problematic. And eventually, we want our learners to be able to figure out the route themselves. And so if there's too much reliance on, sort of following a system, that you don't take stock of the broader landscape. You don't sort of look around and see all the other places where there could be learning opportunities as well. So I think, again, the mapping sometimes can help to just sort of summarize how many assumptions are sort of placed in that, right? If I just click, I want to go from here to here, there's all sorts of assumptions that are being made about how I'll do that. And I think we all know that that we may want to twist the dials in different ways and follow different routes. And I think that's really important. And again, is it about individuals? Is it about classes? Is it about schools? Or is it about even nations? So I think that those are some important perspectives to bring into this.
Thank you so much, Mark. Indeed, important perspectives. And Jolene, how do you respond to some of the questions or provocations that Mark has posed here? And thinking about personalization in the context of Squirrel, what does that mean? And is personalization? We have a couple of questions about the potential of using your platform, for students who have different, perhaps learning differences and who have special needs. Does your platform? How do you think about the relevance of what you're doing for those type of students? And we have a number of questions for both you and for Shrikant as well, just about the data that goes in. Who sees it? Is it private? Does a person actually ever see it? How do you think about data privacy and security? And how is your use of AI? How does it enable you to think about security or privacy in new ways? And does it offer new challenges, whether it's with compliance with new rules and regulations? How are you thinking about the data privacy and security challenge in the context of the AI that you use?
Yeah, I'll go first. So speaking of the data and privacy, in our system, we only take the students' learning behavior, not the private information. So what they do is they just enter the grade, the region, the name doesn't have to be the real name. So not really many detailed private information, even though we collect those information on a separate system as a parent or a teacher or a data analyst. But for the student, their personalized information will not be shared in public. And also those learning behavior data will only kept in our own cloud. So it won't be public, but our AI does need to use those learning behavior data to do the training of our AI system to make it more smarter and more accurate. So that's of course, in China, we follow all the regulations and policies to protect the students' information and even learning behavior data. We don't share with the other organizations. Only if when we had some joint research together with, for example, Stanford Research Institute, Carnegie Mellon University, blah, blah, we only share those learning behavior data with them. Yeah, so that's the data part. And I think the personalization is a very, very big topic. I want to talk about what Mark just mentioned. So the mapping. So in our system, we definitely agree that the student can learn from the system, but it should not say put a student in a place that they cannot go out. Of course, they need to navigate by themselves. So in the AI system that we create, it will be interactive. So the AI system will guide the student to learn to different, routes, and they can try. And also the students themselves, they can navigate, they can challenge, and they can try by themselves. So they will meet in the middle. So it's not only from the AI system to tell the student, hey, you go that route and learn this. Not only from the AI system, but also from the feedback of the students' feedback. And that's our interactive learning. And also in our system, we have a human in the loop, which means the data analyst, the supervisor will be also in the whole loop. And the students' feedback, the students' concern, their information will also be taken into account. So it's not only from the AI system to the student. So that's one part I want to go back. And also some disability and some sorry, I didn't go through all the questions in the chat, but what we have been doing many years is we donate many learning accounts to some rural areas in China and also to some schools that students have with disabilities. So for some students, they cannot go to the schools. They have to stay home to learn because of the disability issue, and they can use our system to learn. That creates a lot of opportunities for students. For example, one student we supported 7 years ago, and she now goes to one of the very famous Chinese universities, because she couldn't go to school when she was at elementary school. So she learned from School AI learning system, and the data analyst can help her from online. So for this kind of special needs students, we don't sell products to them, we donate to them. So definitely help. Yeah, it can help.
Thank you, Jolene. Thank you, Jolene. And as we're drawing to the end of our time together today, Shrikant, I'd like to go over to you. And with this question of the data that's created by students, are the regulations, rules and regulations in India, are they sufficient to help guide you as you struggle with issues related to data privacy and security, particularly with the student use of your tool? How would you characterize sort of the environment around you, and how do you operate in that environment?
Yeah, Mike. So yeah, India has guidelines on privacy of data, and we do follow them. So the way we look at it is essentially any interaction that any child that does with us is actually hosted by us on our own servers. Now, of course, there are cases where we actually engage researchers from other organizations who come in and kind of study our data and create reports. Now, in those cases, we do anonymize the data and make sure that no personally identifiable information is actually accessible to those researchers. This is something which is sort of very valued by us, that we do not share our data at all with anybody for any reason whatsoever. We are a nonprofit, and because of that, we do offer our products and our services for free across India. And the trust that the parents and the children place with us is something that we cherish a lot. Now, coming to the personalization, which Mark was telling, of course, in education, it's sort of called, I think of it as the joy of learning, right? So if you kind of make a very point A to point B straight line, the joy of learning is kind of lost. So the way we kind of help out there is actually by giving various experiences and various different kinds of content that the child can themselves explore. We also have a teacher who's actually curating all of this and assigning homework for their own classroom, so that the teacher, we feel, knows their classroom the best. So they can actually assign very relevant homework to the classroom. And that is how we also bring in personalization with a human touch as well.
Thank you very much, Shrikant. And folks, we're almost to our end of time here today. We will be following up and taking stock of many of the questions that remain unanswered in follow-on blogs and podcasts and wrap-ups from today's session. So please do sign up for the newsletter, the EdTech Hub AI newsletter that was posted. And if someone could post the sign-up link to that again in the chat, that would be great. And a reminder that these events are happening every couple months. We're going to move to monthly starting in September to try to unpack maybe more detail some of the specific challenges and opportunities that we're hearing. Shrikant mentioned earlier about this challenge of even just the relevance of some of these models, given that they were trained on data from other places for other reasons, for other purposes, and trying to make use of those models in context with the communities working in India. That will be one focus area among a number of them. Mark, I would like to give you an opportunity to kind of leave us with an opportunity or challenge based on what you've heard today. We hope that this exposure to Chimple and to Squirrel AI has provoked some new thinking, maybe some new opportunities for collaboration. You're welcome to get in touch with our panelists as well for more follow-up. I see a number of people who posted in the chat and individually, individual direct chats asking for more direct contact. Mark, can you leave us with a question and a challenge and maybe an opportunity?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mike, and a tall order, but wonderful to see these different approaches, and the diversity of approaches is so important right now. I mean, people trying different things and the experimentation that's going on right now. It's very exciting and great to hear about what these two different companies are doing and successes that they're having. I wanted to maybe end with some observations on this idea about, you know, one is to sort of question some things that we take as default assumptions. One is this sort of obsession with efficiency. There, at least in my experience, there's not so much that's super efficient about learning, or at least the richest type of learning. It is, as some of the other speakers talked, it's about the journey, it's about wandering, it's about exploring. And sometimes automated systems can really put sort of strict guardrails around what is learned. You know, you move from this module to that module to this unit to that unit to this chapter to that chapter. It's sort of this, you know, point A to point B. And it's great to hear about some of the attempts to sort of allow for more exploration and wandering. And we all remember different types of wandering. A Google search compared to sort of interacting with an AI bot is a type of wandering, right? It pulls up all sorts of different suggestions. You pick which one you're interested in. You may go back, pick a different one. There's a sort of wandering. When I went to university, I went to the actual stacks in the library. I had a book in mind that I wanted to get, but when I got to that book, I saw there were lots of other books about the topic that I was interested in, and sometimes I didn't leave with the book that I intended to, or I left with multiple books. It's exploration, and as a reminder that, you know, that's where creativity comes from. This is where big innovations come from. I just read an article recently. They were saying that most Nobel Prize winners are working outside of their core area of specialization or even outside of their discipline. So, you know, being able to see perspectives from, you know, problems from unique perspectives, it's so important. It's, again, so sort of questioning this idea of there's a more and less efficient way to learn. We need to make space for that sort of exploration, the joy of learning that we talked about. As far as sort of leaving a few questions, I love questions, and Mike, you are always very good with leaving us with a few questions. I hope you leave us with a few, but at least as it regards AI content, I have this thought of, I think there's a big debate. Do you often people start with AI content? You know, when you start an essay, like, could you, you know, ChatGPT, could you write this essay and then I'm going to fix it up and clean it up? Or you start drafting it yourself and then you want to sort of finish with AI or have AI help you sort of polish it? Or is it just sort of complementing you at moments in the middle? I think we're all going to have to figure out, if we are going to be generating educational content with AI, is it better to start with AI? Is it just a complement? At what point does sort of AI kind of come in? I think that's a major question that we're going to have to be asking ourselves. And then a final thing has to do with this idea of personalization. Again, we talked about personalization for whom, and also, is personalization about preferences? And is education about preferences? Entertainment is about preferences and desires, but education should be about exposure to new things. I saw in the chat somebody mentioned, you know, they said content had been personalized because they said make content personalized for Colombia, and it used an example of mangoes, bananas, and some other fruit that I guess is indigenous to Colombia. Again, I'm sitting in France. People know what a baguette is. There could be very good reasons to introduce things like naan bread and other types of breads. That can be educational too. So what makes content sort of localized or personalized? It's often these very sort of simple things that are indicators of that. So even those questions kind of become complicated, and I think we're all going to need to work through, you know, what is high quality AI content, and who is validating the quality and accuracy of that content is so important. And one of the reasons we're really focused on a sort of a robust role for the public sector in ensuring rules for the road with AI generated content. But thanks again, Mike, and back to you.
Thank you so much, Mark, for leaving us with a number of, I think, fundamental observations and questions and challenges for us going forward. This community we will not have this meeting in August, but we'll start back up again in September with a number of monthly. We're going to go monthly. We're going to have deep dives in a number of topics generated from the community, including looking at AI use in very low resource environments. What's the relevance of that? How can we think about AI use in places where we have huge numbers of students in one classroom, where we have very low connectivity, we don't have a lot of access to devices? Thinking about how can we generate educational data and curated data sets that are clean and available to developers, making tools that are relevant. So these and other topics we'll be exploring. I'd like to thank our discussants today, Jolene, the co-founder of Squirrel AI, Shrikant, the founder of Chimple. I'd like to thank Mark West from UNESCO. I'd like to thank UK FCDO and UK Aid for sponsoring, helping sponsor this whole conversation series. I'd like to thank people at the EdTech Hub and at the World Bank for doing all the back-end work, for helping support the communities exploring these questions, including through the World Bank's EdTech Policy Academy. Thank you to all of you for your attention today. We will be following up with a number of things, including a readout from today's session, a blog post, and a planned podcast as well. We look forward to seeing you all online. Please join me in thanking Jolene, Shrikant, Mark, Verna, and the whole group, and all of you. I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next time online. Cheers.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Jolene. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone. Bye.